Outside a luxurious mountain hotel, a shy young girl stood in the cold, wrapped in silence, until the billionaire appeared before her. What started as a chance encounter under the golden sunset soon turned into a night of heart-racing emotions, secrets, and an unforgettable connection. Stay tuned, because this isn't just a love story. It's a journey where every glance holds suspense, and every heartbeat hides a secret. Don't miss a single moment. The mountains stood tall and endless, their white crowns glittering under the watchful moon. The air was sharp, filled with the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and made every sound echo louder than it should. The world seemed frozen, still, as though time itself had stopped to admire the beauty of the snow. At the edge of the cliff, a grand hotel rose like a palace from another world. Its golden lights glowed warmly against the black sky, windows shining like 1,000 candles. The music from inside floated into the air, muffled by the heavy doors, soft notes of a piano and gentle laughter drifting like ghosts into the cold night. Inside, life was warm. The dining hall bustled with wealthy guests sipping wine, their voices filled with comfort. The chandeliers sparkled above them, throwing diamonds of light across polished floors. Fireplaces roared, sending flames licking upward, chasing away every trace of winter. But outside, just a few steps away from the warmth, sat a lonely figure on the porch. Her name was Alana Payton. Her dress was thin, meant for summer, not for the deadly kiss of mountain snow. The fabric clung to her skin, torn at the edges, and it offered no shield against the merciless wind. Her bare shoulders trembled, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as though she could hold in what little heat her body had left. Her lips were pale, nearly blue, cracked from the cold air that sliced across her face like tiny blades. Her long hair was tangled by the wind, strands sticking to the corner of her mouth. Her eyes, wide and shining, carried a sorrow that words could not fully express. Eyes of someone who had fallen, who had been left with nothing. The snow on the porch crept under her feet, biting at her skin until she could barely feel her toes. Her breathing came in shallow bursts, small clouds of white appearing and vanishing before her. She tried to press herself against the wooden wall of the hotel, desperate to borrow even the tiniest piece of warmth. But there was none. The hotel was a palace for others, not for her. She glanced up at the glowing windows. Behind the glass, silhouettes of people danced, laughed, and lifted glasses. Inside, they toasted to love, success, and luxury. Outside, she was invisible, like a shadow cast away from the firelight. Her voice broke into the night, fragile and trembling. At first, it was only a whisper, meant for no one but the wooden boards of the porch. "May I sleep on your porch, please?" The sound was so faint it seemed the mountains themselves might swallow it whole. Her body shook harder, teeth chattering as her fingers dug into her own arms. Tears brimmed in her eyes, not from sadness alone, but from the sheer cruelty of the cold. She lowered her head, ashamed, as if even asking for such a small kindness was too much. The moonlight touched her face gently, a soft silver glow that only made her look more fragile. Her shadow fell long and lonely across the snow, a picture of heartbreak against the grand hotel's glittering walls. Every second felt endless. Every gust of wind was a punishment. Yet she stayed because she had no other place to go. Above her in the distance, the mountains loomed like silent witnesses. They stood as guardians of her secret suffering, as if waiting for someone, anyone, to notice the girl who asked only for a porch to rest on. Her body curled tighter, her breaths grew weaker, but her whisper still lingered in the frozen air. "Please!" And in that still night, where laughter inside clashed with silence outside, the world held its breath, waiting for destiny to arrive. The sound of tires crunching against frozen gravel broke the still silence of the mountain night. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop before the Grand Hotel, its headlights slicing through the darkness like twin blades of light. The vehicle was elegant, powerful, and commanding, much like the man who stepped out from its warmth. The door opened with a sharp click. From inside emerged a tall figure, his broad shoulders wrapped in a dark wool coat, his posture strong, almost regal. The man's breath clouded in the icy air as his polished shoes met the snow-dusted ground. Alexander Dawson. At 35, he was already a legend. A billionaire hotel tycoon whose name carried weight in every corner of the business world. A man whose fortune built empires, whose decisions shaped futures, and whose reputation kept people both in awe and in fear. But more than his wealth, it was his nature that people whispered about. He was brilliant, sharp as a blade, and cold, so cold. Employees described him as distant, unreachable, like the snowy mountains that surrounded his hotels. His heart, they said, was made of ice. Tonight, as his eyes swept over his property, he carried that same aura of untouchable strength. His gaze flicked across the glowing windows, the elegant porch, and the mountains beyond, where the snow fell endlessly. It was supposed to be another ordinary night. He adjusted the collar of his coat and moved toward the grand entrance, his mind already filled with meetings, contracts, and schedules. He was a man who did not linger, who did not stop for anything unnecessary. But then he saw it. His stride faltered. Something unusual caught the corner of his eye, pulling him away from his thoughts. On the porch, near the wooden post, lay a sight that froze him in place. A woman. She was curled up tightly as though her fragile body was trying to make itself disappear into the wood. Her arms were wrapped around herself, trembling uncontrollably, as if her bones were fighting to hold her together. Her legs were bare against the cruel cold, her skin raw from the wind's merciless bite. Her head bowed low, strands of hair sticking to her pale face, her body swaying as though even the act of staying awake was too heavy for her. She looked like a candle about to burn out, flickering, fading, moments away from vanishing into the night. Alexander's steps stopped. For the first time in years, his body refused to obey his mind. His sharp eyes, trained to scan numbers, contracts, and endless wealth, locked onto the fragile form of this stranger. He had seen beauty before. Women in gowns, models on runways, stars at galas. But this was not beauty. This was something deeper, something unshakable. It was sorrow. It was pain. It was innocence wrapped in suffering, lying quietly in front of his golden hotel. The contrast struck him like a blow. Behind him, warmth, laughter, and luxury spilled from his empire. Before him, on his very doorstep, was a woman who looked like life itself was abandoning her. Alexander's chest tightened. He should have looked away, should have walked into the safety of his glittering world. That was who he was, a man untouched, unmoved. But he couldn't. Something about her fragile figure gripped him, pulling him into a moment he did not understand. His breath slowed, his heartbeat louder than he had ever noticed before. Every instinct told him to leave, yet every part of his soul whispered to stay. The cold man of ice had frozen again, not from the snow this time, but from the storm rising within his heart. And as he stood there staring at the trembling woman on his porch, Alexander Dawson realized his world was about to change. His footsteps echoed against the frozen porch, sharp and steady. Each crunch of his polished shoes on the frost sounded louder than the silence of the night. Alexander Dawson, always certain, always unshaken, found himself slowing down as he approached the fragile figure. The wind howled around them, swirling snowflakes through the air, but his focus did not leave her. She was so small against the wide porch, so lost beneath the towering hotel. For the first time in years, Alexander felt his own heart pound louder than the cold air filling his lungs. "You—" His voice came out lower, harsher than he intended. His words cut through the air, sharp as the mountain wind. "What are you doing here?" He expected no reply. Most strangers, when confronted by him, bowed their heads, stumbled in fear, or ran. But this woman— Slowly, Alana Payton lifted her head. Her eyes met his, wide and glassy, full of unshed tears that shimmered beneath the moonlight. They weren't eyes of defiance. They weren't eyes of pride. They were eyes of a soul on the edge of breaking. Her lips parted, trembling as she tried to speak through the storm of shivers running through her. I didn't want to bother anyone," she whispered. Her voice cracked, small and fragile, almost lost in the wind. Her hands clutched at her thin dress, as if holding the fabric tighter could protect her from the biting cold. She stammered, swallowing back the knot in her throat. "I thought maybe I could sleep here, on the porch, just for the night." The words broke him in ways he never expected. Her plea was not loud, not demanding. Not angry. It was quiet, too quiet. Yet it carried more weight than any deal, contract, or negotiation he had ever made. Alexander stared at her, his chest tightening in a way that startled him. She looked like a bird who had fallen from the sky, wings broken, feathers ruffled, too weak to fly. A creature who once belonged to freedom, now shivering on the ground, waiting for either mercy or death. He clenched his jaw. He should have turned away. That was who he was. A man who never allowed strangers to pierce his world. A man who had built walls higher than the mountains around them. He should have called security. He should have ignored her like he had ignored thousands before her. That was the safe choice, the rational choice, the only choice his reputation demanded. But he couldn't. He couldn't move, couldn't look away. Something deep inside him, something he thought he had buried years ago, was stirring. It was faint, unfamiliar, and almost frightening. Compassion. The cold air stung his skin, but the sharpest sting came from within. What if he left her here? What if by morning, this fragile bird would no longer be breathing on his porch? He imagined her body frozen, lifeless beneath his hotel's golden lights. The thought cut through him like a knife. No, he couldn't. Without another word, Alexander shrugged the heavy coat from his shoulders. It was warm, lined with fur, tailored perfectly to his body. He had never offered it to anyone before. Carefully, he bent down, his tall frame lowering to her level. The world around them seemed to hold its breath. The laughter and music from inside faded into silence, leaving only the sound of the wind and their hearts. Gently, he wrapped the coat around her trembling frame. The fabric swallowed her small body, hiding her torn dress, shielding her from the cruel night. Her eyes widened in shock, her lips parting as though she wanted to speak but could not. For the first time, color touched her cheeks again as the warmth of his coat seeped into her fragile body. Alexander looked at her, not as a billionaire, not as a powerful man, but as a human being. The man who never cared suddenly cared, and in that single moment, something inside him cracked. The ice around his heart began to melt. The heavy doors of the hotel closed behind them with a soft thud, shutting out the howl of the mountain winds. Inside, the world was different. The marble floors gleamed beneath golden chandeliers, and the air was thick with warmth from the crackling fireplaces. Guests strolled past with glasses of wine in their hands, but Alexander ignored them all. His focus remained only on the fragile woman wrapped in his coat. He guided her to the lobby's grand fireplace. The flames leapt upward, their orange glow painting her pale cheeks with a fragile blush of life. For the first time that night, Alana Payton looked less like a ghost of sorrow and more like a woman still fighting to survive. She sat down cautiously on the soft leather chair, her body still trembling from the cold that clung to her bones. Her small fingers clutched the edges of his coat as though it were her only shield against the world. Her eyes lifted to him, wide, questioning, full of wonder and fear. Why? Why are you helping me? Her voice was soft, almost fragile, as though she expected him to take the coat back at any moment. Alexander's jaw tightened. The firelight revealed the sharp lines of his face, but behind his cold expression was something unspoken, something even he didn't fully understand. Because, he said slowly, each word deliberate, no one should freeze to death outside my hotel, not you, not anyone. The way he said it was firm, unyielding, but it carried a weight of truth. It wasn't kindness for show. It wasn't charity. It was a rare piece of honesty from a man who lived his life behind walls of steel. Alana lowered her gaze. Her lashes wet with tears, she tried to blink away. Her lips trembled, not only from the cold, but from the sharp ache in her chest, the ache of someone being shown compassion for the first time in a long time. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Then slowly, haltingly, her story slipped from her lips. She told him about the mountains, how she had come with hope, searching for work. She spoke of the small savings she had carried in her purse, how they were stolen by someone she thought she could trust. Her voice shook when she admitted she had no family nearby, no friends, and no place left to go. As she spoke, her words were not dramatic, not exaggerated. They were simple truths, painted with quiet pain. Every sentence was a window into the weight she carried, the burdens life had handed her with merciless hands. Alexander sat across from her, unmoving. He wasn't used to listening. His days were filled with board meetings, numbers, and decisions where emotions had no place. But with Alana, every word pierced through the walls around him. Every syllable mattered. Her voice cracked when she said, I didn't want to trouble anyone. I thought if I stayed quiet, maybe I could survive the night. Something inside Alexander shifted. His chest felt heavy, his throat tight. He had seen countless faces, heard countless voices begging for deals, money, or influence, but never had he heard a voice that trembled with such pure vulnerability. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He only looked at her, really looked, as though memorizing the way the firelight softened her sorrow, as though afraid that if he blinked, she might vanish. And then it happened. Something inside him broke. The ice that had encased his heart for years cracked, a fissure running deep through the cold man who thought he had forgotten how to feel. This woman, fragile yet strong enough to survive the storm, had unknowingly struck the very core of him. She was not just another stranger. She was the reminder of everything he had once lost, of compassion, of humanity, of love buried beneath years of power and loneliness. And Alexander Dawson, the billionaire whose heart was said to be made of ice, sat in silence, realizing that warmth had finally returned. The night outside grew harsher. Snowflakes spun wildly through the air, layering the mountains in white silence. From the top floor of the hotel, the world below looked like a dream frozen in glass. But inside, in the quiet halls where footsteps echoed faintly, everything slowed. Hours had passed since Alexander first found her on the porch. The hotel's noise faded. The laughter from the dining hall drifted into memory. It felt as though the entire world had emptied, leaving only two souls inside its walls. Alexander's tall figure moved with calm certainty, yet his heart was not calm. Something in him was restless, stirring in ways he had not felt in years. And as he looked at the young woman who clutched his coat tighter around her fragile frame, he knew. This night was no ordinary night. He stopped before the elevator, pressing the button, his sharp eyes glancing at her. "You can't stay in the lobby," he said gently, voice low. "You need rest, real rest." Alana's hands tightened on the coat. Her eyes widened in hesitation, her breath quickening. She feared his offer, though it sounded kind. Because in her world, kindness often came with a hidden price. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Alexander stepped inside, then turned, waiting. For a moment, she stayed frozen, her feet unmoving, torn between trust and fear. But then, something in his gaze steadied her. There was no hunger, no arrogance, no demand. Only quiet strength, as though his presence itself was a promise. And slowly, she stepped inside. The elevator rose, carrying them higher, past the glowing floors, past the murmurs of the guests, until silence wrapped around them again. Neither spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the machine and the unsteady rhythm of their breathing. Finally, they arrived at the top floor. The corridor stretched before them, lined with golden lights, its windows revealing endless mountains bathed in silver moonlight. Alexander led her to the last door. His hand brushed against the key card and the lock clicked open. He stepped aside, letting her enter first. The room was vast, luxurious, yet warm. Glass walls revealed the snowy peaks, glowing softly under the moon. The fire in the hearth flickered, its light spreading across the polished floor. Alana hesitated at the threshold, her body tense. She half expected him to follow with demands, to speak words that would shatter the fragile safety she clung to. But instead, his voice came softly, almost uncertain. "You'll be safe here, Alana." Her chest tightened at the sound of her name on his lips. The way he spoke it wasn't cold, wasn't detached. It was careful, almost tender, as though her name itself was something precious. And in that instant, she realized there was no demand in his eyes, only kindness. Her trembling eased just slightly. She stepped inside, her bare feet brushing against the soft rug, and walked toward the window. The mountains stood tall beyond the glass, endless and silent, their peaks glowing like watchful guardians. Her fingers brushed against the cold window pane, her breath fogging the glass. Her eyes softened, filling with tears she couldn't hide. "No one has ever cared like this before," she whispered, her voice breaking into the quiet room. Alexander stood a few steps behind her, his heart twisting. The words struck him harder than any insult, any challenge he had ever faced. He was a man who had built empires. Yet what she said made him realize how empty it all was. What was the point of his wealth, his towers of glass and stone, if a woman like her had never once known care? Slowly, carefully, he moved closer. His footsteps were soundless against the carpet, but his presence grew stronger as he neared. He stopped just behind her, close enough to feel the tremor of her breath, but not close enough to cross the fragile line between them. His hand hovered near her shoulder. For once in his life, Alexander Dawson, the man who commanded boardrooms and ruled with iron, hesitated. His hand trembled, unsure, caught between desire and restraint, between fear and longing. His voice, when it came, was softer than he knew it could be. "I didn't care for a long time," he confessed, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. "I built walls, high ones, thinking it would protect me, but—" He exhaled slowly, his throat tightening. "Seeing you tonight, I don't want to live that way anymore." The confession hung in the air, raw and unpolished. His chest ached, his pulse thundered in his ears. And yet, for the first time in years, his words carried warmth. Alana turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. Two broken hearts, one frozen by choice, the other shattered by circumstance, had collided in a single night. And in that moment, in the glow of the fire and the watchful gaze of the snowy mountains, something new was born, a night that neither of them would ever forget. By morning, the snow had softened. The mountains looked brighter, as if the world itself had been reborn. Alana stirred awake, wrapped in warm blankets she never thought she'd have. Across the room, Alexander sat silently in a chair, watching her, not with the cold, detached eyes of a billionaire, but with the gentle protectiveness of a man who had finally remembered what it meant to care. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, trust, hope, and the fragile spark of a love neither of them had expected. Over the next few days, Alana stayed in the mansion. She laughed for the first time in years, and Alexander listened like her laughter was a priceless melody. He no longer buried himself in work or money. Instead, he found himself drawn to her presence, to the way she made his empty world feel alive again. Neighbors whispered. Some mocked Alexander for opening his home to a homeless woman. "A billionaire with someone like her?" they sneered. "She doesn't belong in his world." But Alexander didn't care. He stood tall, unshaken, and answered them with only one sentence. "She belongs in my heart, and that's the only world that matters." In time, people began to notice the change. The once untouchable man was kinder, softer, even smiling at strangers in the street. The cold walls of wealth that once separated him from humanity were gone, all because he chose to see a woman for her soul instead of her status. The lesson spread quietly, like fire in winter, reminding everyone that love, kindness, and human dignity were worth more than gold. The cold billionaire had found warmth in the arms of a woman who once sat shivering on his porch, and through their love, society was reminded of a truth too often forgotten. Every life holds value, every soul deserves kindness, and when we choose compassion over prejudice, we build a world where love, not wealth, defines us.